Hey there, everybody. It is Irene Lyon. Welcome to this Facebook Live today. It is Thursday, January 23rd, 2020. And if you're watching this right now, you're probably watching the replay because it takes a bit of time for people to get onto these Facebook Live calls. If you're watching this on YouTube, because we're putting this all up onto YouTube, thank you for watching. We will have, if we don't already, the timestamps below so you can find different parts of the conversation. Today I'm talking specifically about what it means to be trauma-informed and what it takes to become trauma trained. Now, if you're new to me, obviously you might not know my whole history, so I actually am going to go through a little bit of that. As you know, I talk about trauma, I talk about healing trauma, I talk about working at the nervous system level, I talk about neuroplasticity. What you might not know is my history and my background. So I am going to go through that because it's something that we're not asking enough people these days in the mind-body worlds, in the health and healing worlds, and it's really important. And I'm going to use some parallels and some analogies and some things to really hopefully hit home where we're at right now in this history of the healing worlds, the mind-body worlds, the health and wellness industries. It's a big topic. And the one thing that we know for certain, and this is why I believe everyone and their dog and cat and canary is trying to get on this train and become trauma informed and know how to work with trauma, and I'm going to add at the somatic level, is because we know through the research and the science and the practices that are really kind of leading the way right now. Some of them you may not know about if you haven't been around me for a while because they're just starting to surface. But we have the science, the research, and the practices all in the same place at the same time. And this is new. This has never happened before in our current Western industrialized complex world. And that's why there's a lot of confusion. There are a lot of people doing work that they shouldn't be doing. There is a lot of talk about, what is trauma informed, what isn't, et cetera, et cetera. So I am just going to pop into the comments here. I've got questions that I already have from submissions earlier on. Here's how I usually do these Q&As. I like to do a little bit of background. I will give you that. And then I'm going to go through some specific questions. But overall, there's about 3 main questions, in some ways only really 2 main questions that we get. And one of them has to do with, I'm already in the healing profession, I'm a coach, I'm a body worker, I'm an energy worker, I teach kids, I'm a physical therapist, occupational therapist, et cetera, yoga teacher. So there's so much there. How can I start doing this work with my clients? And can you give me some things to do with people? So I'm going to tackle that with a specific question that someone asked. The other question is, what can I do to become trauma trained like you are, Irene, so I can actually work with people's traumas? So I'm going to get into that as well. I'm going to get my pen here just so that I make a point of all these. I have them all down, but I just want to double check. And then the other one has to do with whether or not my programs that I have created so far, there are 2 that are online. One is called Smart Body, Smart Mind, and one is called the 21-Day Nervous System Tune-Up. People want to know if by doing those trainings, if they will be certified to work with trauma. And I'll say right now off the bat, the answer to that is no. No. These courses are not full-fledged certification programs. It is not a university. It is not a 4-year program. These programs are for personal consumption. However, and I'll talk about this in a second, what I found, and I know I've got some of my colleagues here watching, they have found that when they go through these programs that I've created based on my experience as a trauma-trained practitioner in the somatic healing arts, is that they can do their their Reiki work, their massage work, their teaching work. We've got lots of people that work with kids with a trauma-informed lens, and a very solid trauma-informed lens, which is very important. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So if you have a question that is more general around the nervous system and healing it for yourself personally or for others, I see one there. Jackie, I do see your question. I'm not going to get to that today. What I'll encourage everyone to do, if you're watching this now and you want a specific question answered around your own personal process, or maybe someone in your family, be sure to get into my, and this will be for everyone, be sure to start my healing trauma video training. It's a 3-part video training. It's happening right now. We do have it available on my site all year round. So I'm not going to lie, it's always there. But right now is a very special time of the year because we're going into the one time that we run my long form program, Smart Body, Smart Mind. So if you head over to a link that my assistant Crystal is going to post in here somewhere, Jackie, head to that training, get into those videos. It looks like you want some help for your mom. Get her to watch them, and then go into our Facebook community. It's different than this page. Our Facebook group is called Healthy Nervous System Revolution Facebook group. And there are a lot of awesome people who are all trauma trained. My team, there's about 10 of us, and they're answering questions around those training videos. All right, so thank you everyone for being here. If you are someone who is a coach or a healer or a teacher, can you let me know what you do and where you are in the world? Maybe let me know if this is brand new information for you, or if this is like something that you've been studying for a while. Maybe you are one of my students. So I'd love to know, just so that I can get a feel for who is here, what you're interested in. Of course, I've got these questions, these 3 main things that I'm going to talk about, but I do want to see your specifics as well. So quick history about me is oops, let me just close my window. There you go. I am trained in a lot of things. So I didn't go to school and just do one thing. So when I graduated from high school, I went into exercise science. We call it here in Canada kinesiology. I know in Britain and in Australia and New Zealand, kinesiology is more energy work. But this is more biomed, health science, exercise fit. So I was in the fitness world, rehab, exercise rehab. I studied applied human nutrition to a fairly high level. I am not a dietitian, but I understood all of the stuff around nutrition and how it works in the body, especially around sport. I was a personal trainer, a fitness trainer. I led groups, all that good stuff. And fitness is still a huge passion of mine. So I'm going to be talking about that in a vlog in a few weeks. So stay tuned for that. So from there, I ended up getting into biomedical science. I did a master's degree in academia doing research work. So I did the science thing. Yeah, it was a huge job. I did it in Australia in a town called Wollongong. They had a really good university there for what I was interested in. And I did a research study where I put older adults through high intensity strength training and different dietary practices. And I experimented, and I got to know the scientific method. So that was my part in the world of science and seeing how that world works. It was a little jading. It was also a very amazing time of my life. I met lots of good people. And what I saw in this study, and it lasted for about a year, but I was there for just over 2, when we were giving this treatment, I say that with air quotes, this physical activity, this intense physical activity to people over the age of 65, it really showed me early in my life, holy cow, we have the ability to keep changing and growing and getting better as we age. And I think that is really cool. And it shows the neuroplastic capacity of the human system. And it was just really great. So that was my other training, or my other academic area. And then I got into something called the Feldenkrais method. That was for my own personal injuries. I was a ski racer. I really damaged my knees lots of times. I won't go into all of it, but to the point where technically right now I either shouldn't be walking or I should have double knee replacements. And I walk, I exercise, I hike, and I do not need surgery at this point. And even the doctors have said you shouldn't even be able to stand based on the arthritis in your knees, because the picture shows a totally arthritic, osteoarthritic knee. So again, this shows that just because we're given a diagnosis that's physical and we can see it, doesn't mean that that is a life sentence. And it really depends on how we work with our body and how we take care of it in all the facets, right? So most of you, if you are in the health industry and mind-body industry, you might know this already, but I'm just giving you this to give you kind of context. So I got into the Feldenkrais work, which is the work of Dr. Moshe Feldenkrais. He was kind of the first neuroplastician. Dr. Norman Doidge wrote 2 amazing books on neuroplasticity. Look him up. The one called The Brain's Way of Healing formed a lot of the thesis for what is in my online program, specifically Smart Body, Smart Mind. He saw that Dr. Feldenkrais, who's long passed, was sort of the first person to really be like, wow, we can change the mind, body, and the structure and function by movement, by attention, by awareness, by slowing things down, by listening, by feeling, by sensing. Sadly, his work was way ahead of his time. And my interest right now is bringing that I call it Feldenkraisian learning, kind of like Einsteinian and Newtonian and Jungian and Freudian, right? These were all very powerful thought leaders back in the early 1900s and such, and mid 1900s, where they saw really strong patterns of the human condition, of course, our universe, and they became an Ian. So Feldenkraisian to me is this capacity to relearn how to be functional after bad things happen to us, but also after we're physically debilitated later in life. So that was one of my trainings. I got into that training, became a practitioner, had a very successful private practice in an area just north of me here in a ski town called Whistler, British Columbia. Had a great time with my practice, with my students, with my group classes, with my workshops, but this is where it turned. This is where it not turned, but it changed. There were a lot of people who I was seeing who were not getting better with what had helped me recover from my injuries. This is an important turning point. And I couldn't figure out why I was doing all the things that had helped me with my physical disabilities and aches and pains and structural troubles. And they were coming to me with the same things, and I was giving them really good service. And half of the people were getting better, half weren't. And this is where I started to understand what trauma really is, how it gets stuck in our nervous system, in our tissues, in our muscles, in our cardiovascular system, in our immune system, in our gut system, in our lymphatic system, in our way that we think and relate to the world. So I started to look into the work of Peter Levine. So enter Peter Levine and the work of somatic experiencing. And that shifted everything, because I remember vividly I went and studied SE, somatic experiencing, and I remember really looking at what causes chronic illness, what creates a mental illness, from this viewpoint of the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, being what we call dysregulated. So quick little teaching moment. The autonomic nervous system is part of our peripheral nervous system. And again, these are things that if you want to become trauma informed and eventually trauma trained, you're going to need to speak what I'm speaking exactly the same. Not in the way I do it, but you need to understand some of these distinctions I'm going to be talking about, and to a much deeper level. So when we have dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system, which is our peripheral nervous system, this is our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and we have the fight, flight, and the freeze response of one of the parasympathetic branches on at the same time, this is what pops a chronic illness. This is what pops a mental illness, confusion, OCD, all these things that we've labeled as diseases and diagnostics for the sake of really medicine and prescribing insurance, and that's how it works. We've seen that these things, and it's backed up by the science I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, specifically the ACE study, a lot of the research in attachment and attunement, the studies that Stephen Porges have done around the polyvagal theory. We see now that when the nervous system is dysregulated, a person can't be in their higher brain. I'm going to just pause on that. They can't be in their higher brain. Therefore, if I think back to the people I was working with who were in my Feldenkrais practice, Feldenkrais is a very high level, highly differentiated, sophisticated form of mind-body work. And it's beautiful work. I still teach it every year in my workshops that I do. But if someone is living in survival mode and their underlying physiology has the map and the wiring that the world is a dangerous place and we're all going to die and it's not safe to feel and sense and slow down, that is not going to stick. And this is what I've realized why in my Feldenkrais practice there were half the people weren't sticking. It just wasn't changing their movement patterns, and it was because their brain was essentially not functioning at full human capacity level. They were literally living in survival mode. And we could say that the bulk of Western society is living in survival mode and they just don't know it. We know it because we're seeing these high levels of cancer, chronic illness, mental illness, just really toxic relationships, abuse to children, even our own children. It doesn't make sense. This doesn't happen in the animal kingdom. Right? Why is this occurring? And it's because of this higher brain of ours that actually keeps us trapped in our survival mechanism. So it's this interesting paradox. I hope you see that, and that, you know, we're almost too smart for our own good, but then we have this underlying physiology that is smarter, and yet it is also very clumsy and very survival based, and they compete with each other. So I got into this work because of that, got into Peter Levine's work, studied that work really extensively. I had the absolute fortune of attending a lot of his high-level master classes. I assisted many of his master classes, learning very specific pieces that are still starting to make headlines around working with medical trauma, anesthesia trauma, sexual trauma, working with anger and healthy aggression, et cetera, et cetera. So got into that work. Then my next line of study, it's not over yet, was working with one of Peter Levine's main peers and colleagues, and one of my peers, colleagues, and a mentor. Her name is Kathy Kane. Now, Kathy Kane came from a bodywork background, more manual, like massage, something called orthobionomy. And she met Peter back in the, her origin story is on an interview I did with her, so we'll pop that in here. But she met Peter at a workshop. They were both workshop junkies. I mean, if you're in this work, typically we are workshop junkies. The reason why, I'm going to come back to Kathy in a second, I think that us people here, you guys who are really dedicated to this alternative, and I say that with air quotes, way of healing, you're into going to all these workshops, and people might think, your family might think you're insane. You just did that workshop. You did just that workshop. Why are you doing another one? Why are you flying over to that country? All this money spent on all these workshops, it's because there's no one school, right, that covers all of this. And so we have to travel and find the things that make sense to us to complete our toolbox or to keep adding to the toolbox. So Kathy and Peter were workshop junkies, according to her, and they met at a workshop, and he was starting to teach SE, and she was interested in the body and all this. So she studied with him and eventually became faculty, but then she started seeing a lot of chronic illness clients, so people that were so sick, like super, super sick with chronic illnesses, autoimmune, high level sensitivity, like the kind of sensitivity where you have to literally live in a glass house with no fabrics, no scents, nothing. She would work with people like that. And when she started to work with them, it was around the time that the ACE study was coming out, which is the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. Again, this is all stuff that if you want to be trauma trained and trauma informed, you will know this second nature and be able to talk about it. I can't say that enough. So hopefully you're interested in this because you'll need to know this. So the ACE study showed almost factually now that when there is early childhood stress and the environment is dangerous, our nervous system becomes dysregulated and it sets a cascade through the whole body, through our stress chemicals, namely cortisol, and it impacts and it creates toxicity in the entire system. The parts of the brain that have memory and attention get screwed up and messed up. The organ systems don't get enough rest and rejuvenation. Therefore, we end up with digestive problems, autoimmune problems, et cetera, et cetera. So that research, the ACE study, was kind of burgeoning around the time that she was working with clients and experimenting, working at the stress organ level. This is very important. This is why I'm giving you this long background. Namely, working at talking to the kidney adrenals, which are back here, talking to the gut, talking to the brainstem, talking to what's called the diaphragms of the body, the muscle of the body, something called the mediastinum, which is this encasing around our heart that can go rigid and tight when we are in a stress response. So she was working with discovering how to work with all these parts of the organ systems and the physiology that would go into shock, bracing patterns, and high levels of stress, and basically we're going to die physiology. And she started using really strong intention and working with these organs, not by massaging or manipulating them, but her own regulation, feeding that person's regulation. It's exactly the same way we would want to raise a newborn human, through regulation, attunement, connection, kindness, softness, boundaries, right from wrong, but lots and lots of safety. And so she was giving, in a sense, and helping a person find that regulation as an adult, because chances are they didn't get it when they were young because of the adversity, the abuse, the chronic stress, etc. So she started to experiment with that, and then has created these trainings that really work at that organ system stress physiology level. And this is what I do teach in Smart Body, Smart Mind, and I teach people how to work with those things in their own bodies. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because for those of you that have clients that have this history of early abuse, high ACE score, maybe they had lots of surgeries growing up, maybe they were born premature, maybe there was a utero trauma, maybe there was transgenerational trauma. All these different traumas need to be understood because they impact that underlying physiology that tells the human system it's not safe out there. We can't fix that with talk therapy. Even general SE work, somatic experiencing work, is not enough. We need to look at it at this deep, deep level. The best example I can give for that, and then get into some of these questions, is I'm not sure if all of you are Star Wars junkies, but if you watch Star Wars, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, Luke Skywalker, there's this great scene where Obi-Wan Kenobi says to the stormtroopers, says to someone, the stormtroopers, these are not the droids you're looking for. Stay with me here. And he does this thing with his hand. He calms his voice down, and it's like a trance, a hypnotic state. It's like he's talking through his mind and changing that stormtrooper to say, you're right, these aren't the droids you're looking for. Move along. In the last one that just came out, they did that as well. And the cool thing about the last Star Wars is they started to show how you could heal with intention. I think that is so cool, because that is exactly what we're doing when we're working at this nervous system level. When there's dysregulation in the nervous system, we must work at that intention-based level. For you as a practitioner to work at that level with people, you have to be able to do that to yourself first. We cannot do that to someone if we are still in our own dysregulation. There's a reason why it was only shown in that movie. The high-level Jedis did that, right? I just got shivers up my brain saying that. So Kathy's work was huge. She also co-teaches with someone named Stephen Terrell. They teach their early trauma work together. So I also learned through Steve Terrell. I did a great interview with Steve Terrell on my YouTube channel. Crystal can pop it up. So that is how my history came through. And then I was in private practice for a long time, working with people, holding their kidneys, brainstem, gut, working at that Obi-Wan Kenobi level, helping their systems get into the safety space. When we get into safety, what's interesting is a lot of the organ systems start to naturally heal, because the system is just ticking at the level that it wants to tick at, so that the immune system can work, the repair system can work, the gut system can work, the mind starts to change. So a lot of what I see when my clients come into my practice or into my courses is they've tried all of the mind-based things, even positive thinking, behavior change strategies, you name it, and they're really frustrated. And I think this might be something that you see in your clients, maybe even in yourself. And it's like, I'm doing all this really good self-care work. Why am I still sick? Why is my immune system still sluggish? Why am I still having gut problems? Why am I still getting triggered by various things in the environment? Why can I not sleep at night soundly, et cetera, et cetera? Why am I still choosing things that are harmful? It's because if this underlying stress chemistry is running the front of our bus, that is all the system knows. And so this is the next level, if you will, of working with trauma. It's not about changing the brain and the mind. It's about changing the stress physiology. So when I say being trauma, what is it to be trauma informed? It's to understand that at the deepest level possible, but not just theoretically, physically and viscerally for yourself first, because when it's in your system first, working with other people becomes just second nature. It's like the mother that has a baby and intuitively knows what to do because she was offered really good nurturing, attachment, secure connection, etc. It just happens, right? But if someone didn't have that, they're not going to know how to listen to the cues, know when to feed, know when to pick up versus to leave. It's very much the same thing. There's like parallel stories happening there. So I'm going to check out the comments. I'm going to have a drink of something here. Promise it's not vodka. It's a little coffee. And then I'll get into these questions. Thank you for being here, everyone. Okay. Music teachers. So we have someone who is an SBSM member. Great. Someone currently works in addiction treatment center, so this has been helpful. Yes, we know through so much work now that addiction is mainly a lack of regulation in the system. It is the system desperately seeking soothing, some kind of soothing. If it didn't get it when we were young, it's going to keep looking for it. And this is where, again, bringing this regulation work on is so, so important. Okay, cool. I see someone's done Kathy Kane's work. Awesome, awesome. Okay, so I'm going to get into one question here. So the question is, I'm going to work maybe backwards, and that is, will your programs, Irene, so Smart Body, Smart Mind, 21 days, even the up and down workshops I do with Elia, will those give me the green light to work with people? If you are already working with people in whatever capacity you are, you will still be able to work with those people, but your capacity to see those people from a different lens, it's going to change. So Smart Body, Smart Mind, I'm going to talk about that, is not a certification program. It is not designed to teach you to be trauma trained. In some ways, it gives you the most optimal ability to be trauma informed the right way, is how I like to say it, because we're not just doing theory and we're not just talking about the brain, we're talking about the entire system. So the course is theoretical and it's highly practical. There's movement, there's sound work, there is ways of getting into all those parts of the body that I just mentioned. I won't name them again, the stress organs, the diaphragms, etc. And it's demanding that you as the student get into your own system. And the people that have gone through this program have said to me, who are the coaches, the healers, the therapists, I've even had my own colleagues who are trained higher than me in the SE world, a lot of my moderators that help moderate that group when we are in session, and you'll meet some of them in the healthy nervous system group, they had more experience than me in somatic experiencing and counseling, but what they didn't get was the Feldenkrais learning and how I amalgamate it all together. So even them with this high level of experience still got something out of it, because it was giving them an opportunity to work on themselves and to have self-study for themselves. So if you want to become highly trauma informed, I do recommend this, because at this point, it's the best step to go into without having to go through the entire scope that I just talked about in terms of my trainings in SE and the master classes with Peter and going to work with Kathy Kane and then amalgamating it all together and also having a Feldenkrais training. I started all of that in 2004. I'm not good at math in my head, but that's more than 10 years, right? So it took me a lot of time to put all of that together, and it's there for a reason. So trauma informed, that will give you that, no questions asked. We can give you a certificate that shows the amount of hours that you've gone through when you've done the self-study. And I know a lot of systems and guilds that you might be joined with allow you to choose your continuing education, and we've had people use that certificate to show that they've done continuing education for themselves. They just have to make the case as to how this is improving them so that they can be better practitioners, body workers, et cetera, et cetera. So that is something you have to look at within your own faculties of who you are designated with, et cetera. It will not, though, give you trauma training. And the reason why is because, again, it's not comprehensive enough. And I was talking to someone just the other day, and I said, I liken this to medicine. And let me give you this analogy, because I think it's really important. And it's been I've been obsessed with this idea. So if we think about medicine and doctors, they have a very specific training regimen. They have to do pre-med, which is all the sciences. They have to apply to med school. They have to show a certain level of competency. And then they have to go through medical school. And then they go through internship. And then if they want to specialize, they specialize. They are not given, pretend this is a scalpel, and say they want to go into general surgery. They are not given, after just doing a few weekend courses, a scalpel and a person in the operating arena and then say, okay, go at it, make the incision, do the appendectomy. It would never happen. Legally, that would never happen. And so when we think of the somatic healing practices and working at this trauma level, while I understand you're not doing physical surgery and going into a person's insides, we actually are from an energetic and nervous system point of view. We are doing, and I use this with air quotes, brain surgery, right? Because we're impacting the central nervous systems when we work with the nervous system. And if you think about it this way, and I've seen this, so I'll speak freely about what I've seen, we have had people come through our programs. I've had people in my private practice. So has my husband, Seth, who does what I do. People that have been deeply damaged by really bad somatic practitioners who have not done not only the training, but haven't done their own work on themselves. And so they miss the mark, so to speak. They don't see the cues that say stop or refer out. So for instance, someone, if we're not careful, can go into a psychotic break. If we push them too far and we don't watch the override symptoms, we don't know, eyes going glassy, what to do with that. You might put someone into a deep pattern of symptoms. Maybe their history is that of autoimmune or fibromyalgia. And if you push too far, that can send them into a massive autoimmune flare. There are so many examples I won't get into, but these are some of the things I've seen. We've seen people who have gone to ayahuasca retreats, big rah-rah events on the weekend where they're pushed and pushed to do cathartic work. And the people there facilitating don't know how to create the safety, the space to have the system come down, et cetera, et cetera. So I liken it to medicine in that we have not created a program. And I know there are some somatic psychology programs. I have not looked into them fully, but a lot of them are just certificates. They're not full-on schools in a way where they're learning all these different things that myself and some of my colleagues have learned by doing this work over 10 years. So, breath with that. To be trauma trained means either picking, and at this point it means starting with a path of studying something like somatic experiencing, going a route that I have. Here's the thing though, I'm recognizing that that is not efficient for a lot of people because a lot of people can't travel in the way that say I have or my colleagues have. But at this point in time, I have not created my own training. I intend to in the future. It's going to take time. If you want to do this work and you want to become trauma trained, I do recommend Smart Body, Smart Mind as a stepping stone, and then getting into an SE training that is nearby. Another option is sensory motor psychotherapy. That is Pat Ogden's work. She actually studied with Peter and then branched off. And those are two of the main trainings that cover this element of working with the physiology, shock trauma, etc. I have to also say that working at the level that Kathy Kane and Stephen Terrell teach is essential as well. There's a reason why I bring that into my SBSM curriculum, because you can't have one without the other, because most of us don't just have shock traumas that we're healing. We have got early and developmental traumas, birth traumas, etc. that we're dealing with. So someone, again, to ask, how does your program cover the ability to work with people? No, it doesn't. But what it'll do is, if, like, let's say you are a massage therapist, because I know a lot of my clients and students are, and they go through Smart Body, Smart Mind. Their practice as a body worker will be heightened, and they'll be able to attune to their client better. They'll know when to pause. They'll know how to ask the right questions. If they have done the work themselves, they will be more regulated, so their client is going to feel safer with them, which will allow the physiology to shift so that they can get deeper into the work. The other thing that is really important to understand is scope of practice. So someone who is really well trauma informed and working within their scope of, say, body work, they will know, I hope, this is time to refer out. There are too many memories coming. There's too many procedural memories that are discharging, and I don't know what to do with them. If you as a practitioner at any point say to yourself, I don't know what to do with this, then you shouldn't be doing it. Now, if I go back to this idea of the medical world and surgery, one of the things that doctors have to do is they have to have, their mentors. They have to do consults. They have to be watched. they watch the work first, and then they speak their senior through the surgery, and then they get their first chance at doing the surgery, but somebody is watching. At this point in time in our somatic trauma healing world, we don't have that set up, unfortunately, where people are being mentored, where people are being watched in session. We do in the psychology worlds. I know many people who have gone through and done their PhDs in psychology, and the hours is insane that they have to get, the clinical hours, the mentorship hours, but that's different because that's very much mind-based and talk therapy-based. We're talking somatic healing trauma work. So one of my desires is to create that, and I've created that kind of in an indirect way through the people that help me within my programs. We're always consulting with each other. We're always talking about things that are tricky in our practice, and getting ideas and information from those who have maybe a specialty in some areas. So if you are someone who works, again, as let's say a body worker and you're not trauma trained, having someone that you can consult with or having someone that you can refer out to is very important. There's a lot of people trying to be heroes and ego heroes where they're trying to do it all. But again, go back to the idea of medicine. Like you wouldn't put an incision in someone's stomach if you haven't had the right training. So don't go in and try to help someone who's going through a massive trauma response and say, I know what to do. Because chances are you might not know what to do. Maybe you do, but chances are you don't. And then that can go real sideways real fast. So I'm being a little more harsh with that, only because I've seen what occurs when trying to do it when you think you do it goes sideways, and it ain't good. Someone asks here, I'll take a specific question here. What about Thomas Hanna's somatics and the muscular reflexes of stress, red light, green light trauma? I know Hanna, and Hanna studied with Dr. Feldenkrais, and then he went off and branched off and did his own thing with the muscular reflexes. That is all accurate, but it is not enough. We can't just work with reflexes. We have to work with the entire organism and how that organism relates to the environment. So there's nothing wrong with his work and some of the basic movements and practices in Hanna's somatics work. And it's still not enough. It would be like, if I go back to my medical school example, learning about reflexes, right? Infant reflexes, and then saying, okay, you're trained as a doctor, go help people, right? Again, there's this situation we have where there's all these branches. There's so much disconnection in our community right now. We're not bringing it all together. And I'm, in my almost mid 40s. I've been doing this work for almost 20 years. I've seen, I'll speak candidly, I've seen behind the scenes in the organizations of some of these systems that I've studied with. There's a reason why I haven't become a Feldenkrais trainer or a somatic experiencing trainer. To me, those organizations are not set in the way that they should be to bring this all together as if it was like the new medical school, right? Because people are branching off and just taking things and running and doing their own thing. There isn't enough collaboration. There isn't enough connection. And we're asking, I don't think, enough from the people who are going through these trainings. I'll be honest, in the SC community, in the training, there is no testing. There's no competency. You don't have to read a book. You're expected to read Peter Levine's books, but there's no testing of anything. There's no writing essays, no being put on the spot, nothing. It's true. To me, that ain't good. So if you are someone who wants to really study this work, you have to take it upon yourself to do your own self-study and your own testing. I guess part of my journey has been creating this material for you, and in the process of doing that, I am testing myself all the time with my competency, right? So this is where I encourage all of you, if you're interested in this, write some articles. Maybe you don't publish them, but treat it like a real study. Get some of the books, write notes, Send it to one of your clients. Like, hey, does this make sense to you? Find ways to teach this work. Tell your clients about the stress response. Tell them about what you're learning when you do the Healing Trauma video series that's happening right now. Get the information out so that you practice it. This is the best way to become trauma informed and get on that path to being trauma trained. The other thing too that's really important is you got to be clean in your own life. By that I mean, if you want to do this work as a profession, you have to do the work personally and not just on yourself. If you have a spouse, kids, friends, you have to be comfortable being that human animal in your home, expressing emotion, having difficult conversations. All these things that we've kind of brushed under the rug in our society is we don't talk about that. That has to completely change if we want to be really effective healing practitioners at this nervous system level. We cannot lie to ourselves and not be this work when we're living at home. It just doesn't translate. And again, I've seen so many people at the high levels of this work struggle because they theoretically know it and they do it with their clients, and then they go home and they don't feel comfortable crying in front of their husband, or they don't know how to express their anger to their parents, or I mean, there's just so many examples there. So the work has to be your life in a sense. This is where the medical thing doesn't quite cut it, because some of the best surgeons in the world, especially orthopedic surgeons, are mechanics. They don't think about emotion. They just go in and they do the work because they're basically trying to save a limb. And they go through the motions. Sure, they have art and intuition with that, bone that they're fixing, but they don't have to go home and fix the plumbing of the house, right? So this is where this work is very different. Okay, so hopefully, Amelia, that answers your question. Sean says, I think that's how we pronounce it, I had a psychotic break in therapy and now have a neuro disorder and fibromyalgia, and I'm sure it's because I preserved in therapy thinking it was the only way to get better and my only chance. Such a shame. I'm really sorry to hear that. Know that this can shift and it can change. The system is very, very much neuroplastic, so it can shift. It really can. You just have to get the right steps in place. And that is another thing about this work. The way I see it, I call it neuroplastic healing sequencing. So this ability to know what the body needs first. So I mentioned this at the very beginning, but we can't start with really advanced mind-based, thought-based, behavior-based change tactics if the underlying physiology is screaming bloody murder and saying everything is unsafe, I can't do this. Because what'll happen is if we push someone to try to make a behavior change or change their thinking to be more positive, but underneath there is this very angry animal screaming, get me out of here, I'm not safe, you as the person or your client will do very elaborate somatic strategies to not feel that little beast that's wanting to scream. This is how we create symptoms. This is how we create migraine headaches. This is how we create a fibromyalgia flare, chronic pain, a mental psychotic break. Is the system is desperately wanting to get that angry animal, that sad animal out, but society is making it so that no, we have to be positive and do all this stuff, and we don't even know it's happening, and then before we know it, we have a symptom. We have a headache, we have a pain, and we're like, well, and then we think that that's separate, but then that little gremlin is still there, pissed off, but it's creating this other thing. And so then we think that now there's a symptom that has nothing to do with unresolved survival stress, but it has everything to do with unresolved survival stress. So I hope that makes sense as well. I'm going to get back to my questions here. So I just covered whether or not my courses and trainings will give you trauma and trauma-trained skills. The answer is no, but it will give you highly informed, trauma-informed knowledge and practice for yourself. You will be amazed how the art and craft that you have chosen to do, be it body work or teaching in schools, will change and shine when you have this information in your back pocket and in your body. I'm thinking about a school teacher that is a student, and she works with kids who are homeless. It's a school for homeless children, believe it or not. And now that she has this lens on board, she can see and be with these kids in a completely different way. She's sure there has to be learning and lessons, but the ability to be that Yoda, that Obi-Wan Kenobi, to create a field of safety, those kiddos will feel it. And by feeling that, their behavior will change naturally. Hope that makes sense. Okay. I'm going to read something here that came in from Instagram, and it's really important. This shows why it's important for us to get training at a deep level before we start trying to bring people through some of the basics. Now, some of the basics, if you have done maybe a drop-in class with me, or you've downloaded some of my free resources where I get you to, and let's all do it right now together, and I'll say this right now, I'm going to bring you through 3 things that are the basics. If these basics were not in your awareness while I've been talking the last 55 minutes, that is a good indication that you are not ready yet to be someone who works with someone's trauma. Being honest. So, have you been feeling the chair under your bum? Have you been feeling the feet on the ground? Have you been noticing the impulse, if you need to have a sip of water or something, to look away? Have you been noticing your breath? So these are 3 things. It's capacity to sense the environment under us, orient and know what's around us. Like right now I've been hearing the whole time we've been talking in the background, construction going outside of my window. So it's there in my awareness, but I'm still able to connect and stay in my higher brain and talk. But at the same time, I'm noticing my breath, I'm noticing my physiology, I'm feeling the ground under me. So these are some of the basic things. We might ask in a lesson, an exercise, let your eyes wander and see the environment around you, right? This is one of the first things that I teach in Smart Body, Smart Mind. It's the concept of orienting. If you want to learn more about that, I'm not going to get into it right now. Crystal can pop some links regarding the power of orienting and the 2 types of orienting. Again, these are the things that we need to understand if we're trauma informed. So I'm giving you this preamble for this question. And this is such a good question. So thank you to the person who asked this. So the person writes, I have a client, and every time when I guide to connect with his body, he starts different kinds of unusual movements. It feels like different parts have got different movements and they just jump out as they want. It can be crazy shaking his head left to right, twisting his mouth, moving arms, turning around, sudden eyes open. When this happens, my client can't talk nor is in control. Sometimes he receives certain abstract images. Sometimes these parts write or draw to communicate with my client. I'm wondering if you've come across people like this, and what would you suggest to me? So yes, I've come across people like this. I have that stuff go through my system if I'm processing something too. This is a very good example of someone is being asked to connect into their physiology at this nervous system level, because this person who asked the question clearly is learning and understanding about the nervous system. So they are tapping into the field, the force field, if you will, of the autonomic nervous system and these unresolved survival patterns. This is why this work is super tricky, because just having that intention gives that person's unconscious the green light to let it rip. And if you don't know what to do with that, it can be problematic, So the moment there's these unusual movements, we need to know how to see that and actually very quickly be like, this. I can't tell you what it is because it might be something different. If an image comes up, again, we need to see the person and be like, maybe we should this. If someone is all of a sudden twisting and turning, we have to know, do we let the person do this, or this? I'm saying this because I cannot ethically say to you, this is what you should do. This is what you should do. When we're trained, we know what to do. When we have it in our own system and we can feel. Now, does this mean that we won't make mistakes? Yes. Sometimes we will make mistakes when we have the training under our belt. And I have found that the mistakes are less and less when we know what we're feeling internally and we're connected to their safety and their containment. This is also why when we go into this work, we have to have an agreement and a contract with the client. It is unethical to keep doing your massage therapy work and then just sort of decide, I'm going to experiment with thinking about this person's nervous system and I'm not going to tell them. That's not right. You have to communicate and have an open contract that says, you know what, I've been reading or I've been studying with this girl, Irene Lyon, and I'm learning how to be more trauma informed for myself. So I'm just wanting you to know that because it's top of mind and it's in my awareness. And so I want to let you know so that if something comes up for you, that's cool, but I don't have the training to work with it. I hope that makes sense. So that is a great question. And I wish I could say, this is what you should do. I would say get more training involved, do more work with yourself, join SBSM, and really be vocal to your clients about what you're dabbling with. Because again, this is like brain surgery. It's just a little different. And it can be very powerful if we're not careful. So I'm going to go back to the questions here. I'm just reading. This is something that someone's written, so I'll read it out for those of you who aren't seeing the live feed if you're watching this on YouTube. So this is from Amelia. Hey Irene, I'm a personal trainer and group fitness and yoga instructor. Cool, that's what I used to do, not yoga, but the other stuff. I've been doing this since 07. In 08, I began to experience chronic pain. And since then, I've been on a journey trying to understand its root and discovered so much. In 2015, I completed level 1 of John F. Barnes' myofascial release. So that's a type of body work release. And this is where I began to really feel my body and begin to heal. Awesome. I started watching your videos last spring, and the info has been pivotal, and I have completed day 12 of the 21-day tune-up. Yay! So that's awesome. Amelia, you might have a similar story to mine. I'm going to be honest. I grew up figure skating, and I grew up ski racing, and I realized, just honest to God, just the other month, even though I knew it theoretically, how many concussions and whiplashes I probably endured from age 5 to like age 26 when I was still skiing pretty hardcore. I couldn't even, there's no way I could count them on my hands and toes. Probably hundreds and hundreds of whiplashes I have endured, and a few concussions that were pretty, not severe to the point of brain damage, but definitely where I was a little knocked out and not feeling well. And this is going to go into body workers. So this is for the body workers, osteopath cranio. I had a really good craniosacral session about a month and a half ago. Someone that I had been working with for 3 years, believe it or not. And he got into my brain and my structures of my cranium in a way that just hadn't happened before. He actually studied with Peter Levine when Peter did his first ever SE training here in Vancouver. He's an older gentleman. He's in his late 70s. And I was working with him, and I'm like, it feels like you're doing brain surgery. And he's like, I think I am. I went home that night, and I had the most obscene headache and pain that I don't think I've ever had in my life. And I knew that it was because something got unlocked. I won't give you all the pieces, but this is for those who might do that with someone and lock something. I have the training clearly to know what to do with that. I have a husband at home who knows how to support this. I went through a few weeks of being highly nauseous, highly dizzy, not being able to sleep at night because I would go to sleep and my heart would just start pounding. I'd have to sit up and do very gentle movements with my head. The pain was insane, insane. Crying, all of it. I have regulation in my system. So that's the other thing. Just because we're experiencing these somatic symptoms does not mean that we are not regulated. If anything, being regulated will allow these old shock traumas to finally start to come out. Now, the reason I'm saying this, if you're a body worker, a massage therapist, you may open up something in a person. If you have this knowledge in your brain and in your body, the key is knowing how to help support them so that they can keep moving through these symptoms and not see the symptoms as something that is wrong or bad or something that should be medicated with a shit ton of Advil or Tylenol or aspirin, but just that this is something that is moving through. True, and again, true story, I had another wave last week to the point where it felt like I had been hit by a car for about 5 days. I had to take a little easier. I had to still work. And now that deep shift and pain is gone. Is it 100% gone? Not completely, but I'm here, I'm clear. I don't have the tension that I used to have. I'm giving you this example because it just shows how deep this stuff is in our bodies. I am 44. This stuff happened in my teens, early years and 20s. I have done so much work through my training, so many sessions, so much body work, and something decided to pop in January where this just started to come out. And I say that because I want everyone to understand here that this work is not something that is just done and then all good. That is just not our situation right now, because culturally we have stored so much. We've kept such stuff in control and check. If I had had the mom and the dad, and I had good parents, if I had had the mother and the father that were abusive and didn't let me do anything that I wanted, it would be even worse. I probably would have a chronic autoimmune condition. If I had the parents that allowed me to, shake after my skating and knew how to take me to maybe some osteopaths when I was a teenager, not that they probably existed where I lived back then, but if there was some treatment to help move that out, these deep stored traumas probably wouldn't be here in the same way. So we've got this interesting situation where as we start to get this stuff out and have more awareness of it, our clients and ourselves are going to be feeling things that might seem really scary and wrong, but actually when we understand how procedural memories store in the tissues, it'll actually make a lot more sense. So I hope that story was useful for some of you. I had to share it because it's really top of mind of me right now. And it still surprises me. I'll be really honest, it still shocks me that even after everything I've done, teaching others how to do this work for themselves, that there's still lingering gremlins in my system. And I say that with a smile because each time a pass of old stuff comes out, I am so grateful because it means the likelihood of me getting something like Parkinson's or something like MS or something that involves spasticity in my nerves and crippling chronic pain is not going to set in, right? We're seeing that a lot of those conditions, when you look at the people's histories, they have got really chronic stress, old injuries, surgical traumas that are essentially showing up as these defense mechanisms to try to get out of that intensity in the survival physiology. So a really good book, actually, and I mentioned this last week, I think, in my Q&A call, is Trauma Spectrum by Robert Scare. He talks about things like tics and Tourette's and torticollis and cervical dystonia, that shaking that we see that's almost like pre-Parkinson's and doesn't make sense. The more I do this work, the more I see that a lot of those symptomologies are the expression of incomplete procedural memories that are desperately trying to get out. So, okay, that was a bit of a tangent. I saw a question here. David asks, what are your opinions about NLP? So NLP stands for Neuro-linguistic programming. It is a, I am not trained in it, so I'll say that, but it is something that we might see Tony Robbins do a lot of, some of the top level gurus who are on stage getting people to like repeat things and say things and change the way that they think and talk. It's kind of that. I'm probably not doing it justice, but I think there's a time and a place for it, just like EMDR has a time and a place. I have dabbled with EMDR with my own somatic experiencing person that I work with for myself, but it's not something that we just do the whole session. It might be something that he uses at the end to contain and solidify the survival stress and trauma work that we've done. So I think that it could be very useful when we have this underlying lens that we're working with, that is the stress chemistry, the stress physiology, and the somatic physiology that we're working with. Because it is important that we speak in a way that's really solid and clear with our clients. A lot of people will say, oh, this somatic work is all bottom up. I wrote about this a little while ago somewhere, and all the talk therapy is all top down. And actually, that's not 100% true. Really good somatic healing work, at least the stuff I've learned and I've watched with Peter and Kathy and in my own practice, it's blending all of it together. Because our main way of communicating as humans is through language, right? And it's not always the most accurate thing to do, but it is there. And so we need to know how to talk, when to talk, how to slow it down, how to speed it up, how to be more firm, how to be, you know, there's all these shifts in what's called prosody. So the way that our voice intonates and comes out and changes tone, so that we can help our person, our client, either feel more safe or help them get more energy, right? And so again, there's just this thing where we don't want to just have this straight toned, I'm always calm, I'm always chill. A person's going to be like, yeah, that's not safe, because I actually don't feel chill right now. I'm really freaking out and you're trying to calm me down, and screw you, right? There's a story where Peter tried to calm his first client down back in the late 60s because she was having a panic attack, and that just blew up in his face. And that was kind of the springboard that let him realize, okay, this person is feeling incredible stress and physiology that's high alert, and I'm asking her to go against what her physiology is feeling. And then it creates this rift. Not only does it create unsafety, that physiology is like, I don't want to come down. I am so revved up right now and I got to go. Okay. Okay, let's get back to a specific question here. Let me know if there's anything that is top of mind from what you guys have been hearing me speak to. One of the main questions that people have here is, and this is general, is what is the most efficient way for someone to get trained and start on the trauma healer journey? So again, I wish I could say do this, and this. I know what I've done. It's worked pretty damn well. I also had early training, living and breathing the life of two parents that were both veterinarians. So I grew up in an animal hospital. I was around sickness and healing. I had to be highly attuned working in that animal hospital, or else I'd get bit or scratched. I still have scars on my hands from cats scratching me when I was a kid. So I had to learn very early on how to attune. So the first thing, if someone wants to get trauma trained, is I can't say this enough. Sorry if I sound like a broken record. We have to do the work first ourselves. Because if we don't, we are not going to have the regulation needed for people that come to see us with stuff that we just don't want to hear about. And I got a question a little while ago on Instagram that said, what do we do if we get dysregulated and triggered by something our client is telling us? And I'm going to be a bit of a hard nose again. I'm going to say, well, if you are getting dysregulated and triggered by a gruesome story of abuse and rape and injustice, for example, then you're not ready to be doing the work, right? You have to be able to hear something that you can't even fathom happen to a human and be like, okay, let's work with this. What do you notice when you say that, without flinching? And maybe something in the back of your mind is like, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened to that person, but you don't say that to them, right? And so there is a level of regulation. I go back to the doctor thing. I go back to the medical doctor thing. If a surgeon is presented, especially an ER surgeon, right? They're in the trauma pit and they freeze and they get disgusted by what they see, they're not going to survive very long. If we look at, this is terrible, I'm going to quote Grey's Anatomy, medical TV show that's been going on forever. There's a lot of drama in there, but it's a great show for showing the new kids who have not learned how to deal with trauma and really bad smells. And their older mentors are like, you got to breathe through your mouth. Just go through it. And they're being tested and trained so that they can deal with very stressful things without flinching. And so I go back to, again, this is the question, what is the most efficient way to get trained? Start with your own stuff, work on your own system, start to study. I still am a big believer in the somatic experiencing training. I have no affiliation with them, but what occurs is at least it's giving you a solid background in how to see certain concepts. And there's something about when you pay and you go and you study, it makes you show up and do the work. I have found, because I have got lots of my students in SBSM who have done the somatic experiencing training after they've done SBSM, and I've heard through the grapevine that the trainers and the assistants, they now know when someone has gone through Smart Body, Smart Mind, because that person is that much more regulated and more present. And this is the other strange thing, is there is no prerequisite for being embodied and regulated to join a somatic experiencing training. So if you can go into that with that much more knowledge and regulation and embodiment in your own system, you're actually going to get a higher level of education with the same curriculum that everybody else is going to get. So I still recommend SE. I recommend Kathy Kane's work, especially her somatic resilience and regulation work, her touch skills training work, which is for body workers more so. I don't have personal experience with Pat Ogden's sensory motor psychotherapy, but from what I know, it's still something that you can go to and learn from. I've heard great things about Hakomi. That is something that Pat Ogden studied. That's the work of Ron Kurtz. There's really, at this point again, there isn't a distinct track like if you were to go to do medical school. You have to follow your own impulse and move through the steps to find what you need for what you want to do. For a lot of people, they might just be okay doing Smart Body, Smart Mind and continuing to do their body work, their coaching work, their Reiki work. I'm thinking about one of my students and a good friend of mine, Janet Raftis. She is a psychic, intuitive healer, and Reiki master. And she did Smart Body, Smart Mind, and she's chosen not to go on and do more trauma training because she's got enough on her plate doing the work that she does. But she just has this lens that's seeing so much more, and that's what's really cool. Okay, what time are we at? Let me see the questions. Thank you everyone for still being here. If you're on here live, we've got about 62 people. How does psychopharmaceutical medication influence somatic healing work? My sense is you mean the medications that, like the benzodiazepines and the SSRIs and the antidepressants. I'm assuming that's what you mean. So I am not a psychiatrist. I'm not a medical doctor. So I can't speak from that position. But what I've seen is that sometimes medications can help a person get to a point where they can do the somatic work. I've also seen the opposite, where someone has been on these meds for so long that the system is dependent and isn't functioning straight, and it's hindering their ability to sense their body, and then that's troublesome. But I've also worked with people who have been on anti-anxiety, antipsychotics, and antidepressants, and they have gotten off of them, anti-epileptic drugs too, if I'm thinking about this straight, because we did really good titrated work, and then they worked in conjunction with their psychiatrist and their neurologist, and they monitored themselves. This is the other thing is, again, this is not an exact science where the only thing you're going to need as, say, a client is a somatic therapist. If you have a real medical thing going on, you're going to want to have a team of people helping this situation. And eventually what we see is people need less of that help. And the other thing too, I've seen the same trouble with people who are chronic at using, say, marijuana is another one that can really dampen the ability to sense the body. It numbs out the body when it's used in a way that is reckless and chronic. And this is something that we're seeing more and more of now that cannabis is legalized in a lot of places. This is something that my husband's going to be talking a little bit more about in the future, because it can be used. These plant medicines, for example, can be used, but they have to be used with embodiment and nervous system connection involved. If we just use these things blatantly to try to calm ourselves down and we're not feeling what's going on inside, things aren't going to shift in the way that they can shift. Okay, I'm going to go back to my questions. Someone asks, I've been watching and experiencing your YouTube videos, thank you. Since I'm already familiar with the general concepts of embodiment, I'm wondering if there are some that get right to the heart of the exercises, or would you consider offering some of those to us ready to apply the exercises to ourselves and our clients? So again, this comes back to, we can have a concept of embodiment, but are we living it? And I'm starting to not love the term embodiment, because I've met some people who use that term recently and they're not actually, they're in their body, but there's also massive amounts of stress physiology driving the front of their bus. And in terms of exercises, this is where I say, check out the basics that I teach in some of my ebooks, especially the 7 steps to de-stress and the 4 simple steps to calm overwhelming emotions and sensations. Check those out. Crystal can post those up here. There are 2 ebooks that you can grab from my site. They're really, the basics are really basic. Again, I'll ask the question, since I've been talking, have you been feeling your butt under you? Have you been feeling your breath? Have you been feeling the environment around you? This ability to multitask our awareness while we're in discussion, for example, or learning, is a lost art and skill. And a lot of people will say, well, that's impossible. When you're in your head, you can't be connected to your body, and that's not true, right? But that takes practice, because we have learned so much along the way that when we're in school, it's all about the brain. And then when we go to the gym, it's all about the body. But even now, people are going to the gym and they're not even feeling their bodies. They're watching television and doing all sorts of stuff that isn't bringing them into their bodies. So I don't have a set of exercises I can just give you and say, do these with your clients, because I found that it depends on who the person is, who you are, and creating a situation where you're learning really the basics and the foundations of what nervous system health is and healing trauma at this level is. A lot of my students will go through Smart Body, Smart Mind, for example, and they will start to create their own versions of how they guide someone through feeling their bodies. And that's totally kosher, right? That's totally fine, because your way of working might be different if you're a teacher versus a body worker versus an energy worker, etc. So I hope that answers that question. think I've already answered a lot of this. I do not offer courses to train people to be trauma trained yet. It is something that I do want to do. I'm not going to do it in a way that is quick and not thought out. Of course, I have thought about this a lot. I know a lot of you who are my students have been waiting for a professional training from me. I will tell you this, it isn't going to be something that is just a few weekends a year for a few years. It will be something that is like real school. And the reason why is because we have to treat this like a real profession and a real practice, the way medical doctors go through training. And I'm period. I'm pretty certain with that because I've just seen how many folks go through these trainings that currently exist and they don't have a cohesion. I hope that makes sense. There's no cohesion to the study, to the layers of how we should start practicing, how we should start experimenting with people, right? One question that someone had was, what's the most optimal training sequence? That was David. I mean, again, it comes back to, if we think of my curriculum, Smart Body, Smart Mind, and if I even think about what I teach when I'm doing my workshops with Elia and Marak in our up and down work, we don't just start with theory, we start with practice and play and engagement. We're not teaching the polyvagal theory by pen and paper at the beginning. We're doing a game where we're actively working with the polyvagal theory. If there was a training situation, we would do that game for a week, and then we would go into the books, and then we would study it, and then I would put you on the spot and make you tell us what the polyvagal theory is, while having you sense your sensations and emotions and go through the whole process, so that we're really vigorously and rigorously training people to be in a situation where they can be on the spot, know the theory, stay embodied, stay connected, and course correct whenever they need to. So I have a friend who is a Marine, actually, a pilot in the Marines. He flew Prowlers, and watching him drive a car, and I've had the pleasure of flying with him in a little plane, is so fascinating, because he is a high-level pilot, and he told me about the training they had in the military so that they could be put into any situation and know what to do. Now, of course, there's a little bit of trauma in that as well. So, of course, I wouldn't do it such like that. But even when he is the experienced pilot that he is, at the beginning of each flight, he has his checklist and he's going through it. And if one of his kids interrupts him, because I've flown with his kids, he has to go back to the top of the list, right? And even though he's experienced, there is a profession and a mastery at that level that I really hope for in this world. So part of the thing I wanted to do coming on here to talk about this is to really explain this isn't something that could be taken lightly. A lot of people out there right now are taking this trauma work lightly, and they're trying to do too much of it and go too far with coaching clients, their bodywork clients, and it's really ethically, in my opinion, creating some karmic debt for those individuals, because I believe in that. And I think it's really important that we do the work and see that we're at a position right now that is really unique. Like I said at the very beginning of this call, we have the science, the research, and the practices in place. I will say, and this is going to be a bit biased, but what we've put together in Smart Body, Smart Mind is probably the most comprehensive trauma-informed online program for self-education and healing that exists in the world right now. I can say that with confidence. We've had 63 people from 63 countries go through it, all different walks of life, from people who are 80 with chronic pain to 20-year-olds who are learning how to be body workers. There's so much diversity in there, and I just see that people are hungry for this, which means that we need to create a school that teaches other people how to do what me and my team do, but doesn't take 20 years to do it. So for those of you who are desperately wanting to work at the trauma level with your clients, I urge you to be patient. If you haven't done Smart Body, Smart Mind, if you haven't done my Healing Trauma series, please get into that. It might give you all you need. Maybe you love being a body worker and you don't want to work with all these deep memories. And trust me, there's a lot of deep stuff that humans hold. You'd be amazed what we endure and survive. You know, so you might not want to do that, but I think having the lens is going to inform your practice and make it that much richer. So I'm just going to look at this and make sure that there wasn't anything that I haven't covered. If I haven't read out your questions specifically, it's only because all of these questions are kind of around the same thing. Someone did ask me if I knew about some schools at JFK University, Antioch University. I think they've got something out of Santa Barbara. There's somatic psychology programs. Again, there's nothing wrong with these programs. The key is are you doing the work on yourself, and are they getting into the diversity of the traumas that exist currently in human culture? It's more than just shock trauma. It's more than just sexual trauma and early developmental trauma. We have to consider cultural trauma, the conditioning that we have been put through, anesthesia trauma. I mean, there's so much that is just starting to be understood. I'm excited about this. I hope you can see that I am. I hope you are if you're here watching this. Someone said, is this going to be an online school? No, this will not be an online school. Without a doubt, we will use the online platform for education and connecting, but this will be something where you have to be in person. You couldn't go to medical school online. You can't go to dental school online. I don't think you can go and get a lawyer degree online. Maybe you can, but you know, the real hard-nosed professions, engineering, teaching, I'm teaching, maybe you can do this online, but the real good schools that are teaching trades, this is like a trade in a sense. You're learning to become a plumber of the nervous system, or electrician of the nervous system, an engineer of the nervous system. So there will have to be an in-person component. I understand that means travel and expense and cost, and people go to medical school. People go to do massage therapy school. They travel, they find a way. I'm trying to figure out ways to make that possible because, of course, in traditional university, you can get things like student loans. And when it's privately run, it's a little different. So these are all the things I'm thinking about, you guys. Thank you for being here. If I didn't get to a specific question, you can let us know through our other Facebook group, the Healthy Nervous System Revolution group. As I've said, if you have not yet started my Healing Trauma video series, please do that. It's not the whole kit and caboodle, but it is a start. And if you are really serious about being trauma informed the right way for your clients, I cannot recommend enough Smart Body, Smart Mind. We start in March 2nd. The enrollment opens for normal people, the public, on the 17th of February. If you are a 21-day member and you've already started working with me throughout my 21-day nervous system tune-up course, that enrollment opens for you on the 3rd of February. You could start, for those of you that want to get started, you could start with the 21-day nervous system tune-up now. That's a self-study course. It is not the full enchilada. It is the basics, so it will not teach you how to work for yourself with healthy aggression and with the stress organs. It's just the beginning course, but you could go through that now until the 2nd of March and get in. And then, of course, if you do the 21-day tune-up, we take that cost off of the tuition for Smart Body, Smart Mind, because the 21-day tune-up was curated from Smart Body, Smart Mind. So they're not the same course, but it's like the beginning course. And I created that so that when we don't have Smart Body, Smart Mind running, which only happens once a year for 3 months, so March, April, May, a person could start the learning at any time. So I hope this all makes sense. I know I've been talking a lot for the last hour and a half. I really hope this has given some insight on the situation that we have right now in the somatic healing worlds. It's very new, this work. There is no such thing as a full-fledged somatic healing trauma practitioner. at least at the level that I believe we need to have, so that a person can be that medical surgeon. And I say that, with air quotes, for this type of work. I believe I've gotten to that point. Some of my colleagues have, and it's taken us a long time to get here. So you can't cut corners with this work. Please, I urge you, don't cut corners. Think about your clients, think about your students, think about their health and their well-being. And it'll be clean if you do this work on yourself first and then put in the work to study. And if you are, under the age of 50 and you want to do this work, there's a long time to get into this and work with this level. I think when we all get a little more regulated, we're going to find that our longevity is going to increase, and our health within that longevity is going to increase. So there's a lot of time to do this. So don't stress out if you don't have all this stuff and you want to do the work. It'll happen. Set the intention, get into the field, and let's all become really good nervous system Jedis. So thank you, everybody, for being here, listening. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for watching it afterwards. And we'll come back next week with another Q&A. I'm going to be talking about the 5 big myths around healing trauma. And let's see if I can remember what they are. I'm going to be talking about breath work, cold exposure therapy. Ice bathing is huge right now, so I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to be talking about meditation. I'm going to be talking about positive thinking and shaking. So these are really common topics right now that are kind of being thrown out by everyone and their dog, cat and canary, and everyone's trying to find a quick fix and a hack to heal the nervous system. And to give you just a little bit of insight in that, some of these things can work at the acute level to calm the system down, but acute calming down is not the same as chronic nervous system regulation. It's completely different. So you may need something to help bring the system down in a moment of panic or stress, but because that works, that doesn't necessarily mean that that is the ticket to providing regulation to the whole system. If we need to keep doing breath work, if we keep needing to expose ourselves to cold water, if we keep needing to meditate to calm ourselves down, to keep positively thinking, and it has to keep happening over and over again, it's actually not regulating the system. Because if our system is regulated, we don't need any of that. We just live our lives, wake up, do our thing, do our work, eat, sleep, have fun, be with our people, etc. So a lot of these practices are quick fixes. They're acute therapies, which I think are helping our current population, but it isn't enough, in my opinion. So I'm going to be talking about that next week. Okay, everyone. Whew, thanks for being here. It'll be next Thursday, same time, same place. Love you all, and we will talk to you later. Bye.